The room was silent, but his mind was. They had just finished speaking, and the words still echoed in the air like something heavy that refused to leave. You're not cut out for this. He stood there, frozen. Not because he didn't understand what they meant, but because, deep down, a part of him feared they might be right. This wasn't the first time he had heard it. Not the first rejection. Not the first doubt. Not the first quiet dismissal of everything he believed he could become. But this time, it felt different, because this time, he had almost believed in himself. And now that belief was cracking, long before history would remember his name. Abraham Lincoln was just a boy trying to make sense of a world that rarely made space for him. He wasn't born into power. He wasn't surrounded by opportunity. He wasn't the kind of child people pointed at and said, "That one will change the world." He was quiet, awkward, poor, and often alone. Books became his escape, not because he had many, but because he had so few. Each page mattered. Each word felt like a doorway into a life he couldn't yet live. But even then, there were whispers. He's too slow. He's not strong enough. He'll never amount to much. Those words didn't disappear. They settled somewhere deep inside him and stayed. Years passed, but life didn't get easier. It got heavier. Failure didn't knock politely. It barged in. He lost jobs, failed in business, faced rejection after rejection in politics. Each time he stood up, the world seemed to push him back down harder. And people noticed, not his resilience, but his losses. Maybe it's time to give up. Maybe you're chasing something that was never meant for you. And slowly, doubt began to feel louder than hope. But no one knew what he was hiding. Behind the quiet determination, there was a storm. He questioned himself constantly. Late at night, when everything was silent, his thoughts weren't. What if they're right? What if I'm not enough? What if this is all I'll ever be? It wasn't just failure he was fighting. It was the growing belief that failure defined him. Then came a moment that would change everything. Not loudly, not dramatically, but deeply. He saw something that didn't sit right with him. A system that treated people as less than human. A world that normalized injustice. And suddenly, his struggle wasn't just about him anymore. It was about something bigger, something heavier, something that wouldn't let him stay silent. That decision would cost him everything, because standing for something in a divided world doesn't make life easier. It makes it harder. Criticism grew louder. Opposition became fierce. People who once ignored him now attacked him. Not just his ideas, but his character, his worth, his right to lead. And still, the doubt didn't disappear, even as he stepped into leadership, even as people began to listen, even as his name started to matter. Inside, the same questions remained. Am I really the one for this? Or am I just the last option they had? Leadership didn't erase insecurity. It amplified it. But something had changed. He no longer needed to feel ready. He only needed to feel responsible. Responsible for the choices in front of him. Responsible for the people who believed, even when he didn't. Responsible for doing what was right, even when it felt impossible. And so he kept going, not because he was fearless, but because he had learned something powerful. Courage isn't the absence of doubt. It's the decision to move forward with it. There were days when the weight felt unbearable, days when every decision felt like it carried consequences too big to measure, days when he wished, just for a moment, that he could go back to a life where the world expected nothing from him. But he couldn't, because now everything depended on him, and history would later remember him for moments that looked strong, decisive, certain. But what history rarely shows is the hesitation before those moments, the fear, the loneliness, the quiet battles no one saw. He wasn't the perfect leader. He wasn't the most confident man in the room. He wasn't the obvious choice. But maybe that's what made him different, because he understood struggle not as an idea, but as a reality. He understood pain not from a distance, but from experience. And that understanding shaped every decision he made. Slowly, things began to shift. Not overnight, not easily, but undeniably. The same man who had once been dismissed was now being heard. The same voice that had once been doubted was now guiding a nation. The same person who had been told, "You will never succeed," was proving, step by step, that success doesn't belong to those who are believed in first. It belongs to those who refuse to stop believing, eventually. And yet, even then, even at the peak of his journey, there were moments of quiet reflection, moments where he looked back, not at the victories, but at the road that led there, the failures, the rejections, the nights he almost gave up. And he realized something that most people never do. The person he had become was built by every moment he thought he wasn't enough. Because those moments didn't break him. They shaped him. They forced him to grow, to question, to endure. They taught him resilience, not as a concept, but as a necessity. And maybe that's the truth we often miss. We look at people like Abraham Lincoln and see greatness. We see leadership. We see history. But we don't always see the human behind it. The doubt, the fear, the quiet voice that once said, "Maybe I can't do this." Because greatness doesn't begin with certainty. It begins with a choice to keep going, even when everything suggests you shouldn't. So if you've ever been told you're not enough, if you've ever felt like you're falling behind, if you've ever questioned whether you're capable of becoming something more, remember this: the people who change the world are not the ones who were always believed in. They're the ones who kept moving, even when they were. Because sometimes the most powerful journeys start with someone being told they will never succeed, and choosing not to listen. History is not just events, it's human stories. Subscribe for more